What are you doing? Okay. Am I live?
You're live.
What have you done? All right. I hope everyone's enjoying themselves at RavenCon this year. Woo! I really don't need to make an introduction because you all know why you're here, but nevertheless, guest of honor, Alix Harrow. Woo! We've done a lot of these here. You all know the routine by now, I'm sure. I'm going to talk for a while, and then around the second half of the panel, I'm going to open it up to you guys for some questions, okay? So if you got some save them up. All right, so when did you know you wanted to be a writer?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to do this. This is wonderful. And thank you for accepting it when you originally invited me to do a reading. And I am a person who believes that reading should be done exclusively by people with really cool accents. That's the only time you get to do it. I got to hear Nicola Griffith do one of hers, and she has a Welsh accent. Yes, that's allowed, permitted. She could do 2 hours and that would be fine. I just have a very ordinary voice and I'm not going to do it. So thank you for agreeing to ask me questions instead. So I feel like this is the same answer for every writer, which is just that I think if you consume enough fiction young enough, at some point you're like, is this a job? Then that's the only job you want to do. And then there's a long period of realizing that it is not a job that's like feasible or that like pays, and that you'll have to get, you have to figure out how to like exist before you can make being an author work.
At any point in that early career, when you're starting off and you're writing, your short stories and you're finding your voice, at any point in that, did you ever see yourself as a Hugo Award-winning author? Or was that a complete shock to you?
I don't think so. I was at the point where it felt very ambitious to see myself as a published author.
Yeah.
Especially you start to do your research and you're reading how to get published blogs and the advice on the internet, and it just gets bleaker and bleaker. The more you know, you're like, oh, this is hubris even to be doing this, and so I had talked myself down to the lowest possible expectations. And then when I got my first book deal, I was like, cool, I'm gonna quit my job. And my agent was like, oh, I don't know if this is quit your job money. And I was like, oh, I see the problem. You don't understand how little adjuncts make. It is. Normally, no. Is that a good choice for me? Yes, definitely. We're fine.
Did winning the Hugo and actually the Nebula and the BAFTA, how did that change your career?
You know what's crazy is that it changes your reputation and it changes what they print on the book, but it's so much an industry that is actually pretty divided. Artistic achievement is not synonymous with a career. So you will find that many people who have won those awards, and way more awards than I have, are still people with multiple jobs or with day jobs and things like that. So it did not change my life financially. That was pretty much just word of mouth from readers, who have no idea necessarily what a Hugo Award is. There's things that are important in actually very small communities that I'm a part of.
People that pay attention to Hugos is a very niche.
It's a small group of people. Yeah. You'll never get a bigger range of reactions when people find out you're a Hugo winner, some people are like, that's good for you. I understand. I'm sorry. I'm just in this weird club, and I'm really happy.
The thing I love most about the Hugo, though, is nothing about the award itself, but literally the award itself, because every year the convention is hosting designs the base for it. The award is always the same, but they always have a unique base. So what base did you?
I had the Irish one.
Okay.
It's very cool. It's very, very cool. It did slightly break in shipping, so if you touch my Hugo Award, it does fall apart. But that's fine.
And where do you keep it?
In my office, in a place where if I'm feeling annoyed by someone, I can move it into the back of the Zoom. I feel like that will help me. Or out of it if I'm feeling like I don't want to be annoying.
Just has everyone here, how many people read the actual Dead Tree books of her? Yeah. Aren't they beautiful?
Yes.
Your publishers are spending some money on how did you get that deal?
That's pure luck.
Yeah.
Like truly, I do feel like this is one of the things I always want to emphasize, because I think in a lot of the publishing advice, there's a sort of like the idea that if you follow the right steps, or you do the right things, or you achieve a certain level of artistic quality, that you will be rewarded with like a certain level of attention, press, marketing, quality printing, and that is absolutely not true. I think there is like a baseline level that you need to kind of get in the door, and then I think an algorithm in sales, they like spin a big wheel and then like put together some numbers, and that determines a lot of like how your books look, where they get advertised, how they're presented to the public, who writes the copy, like all these things that are completely out of my control.
We see a lot of portal fantasy and fairy tales popping up in your works. Why are these two so close to your heart?
I mean, I would argue, I think I can make a pretty good case that portal fantasy and fairy tales are like so baked into the genre from the beginning that like, or at least the strands of the genre that I was kind of raised on. My mom has a literature degree, and she did African American literature and British literature, and so I have a very specific lineage of books that I was given, and I had all of the Victorian children's book, like Victorian fantasies, late 19th century into the mid 20th century. There were always kids going through doors. That is like what the genre originally was. And so I think that's just, that story structure in particular is pretty baked in pretty deeply.
What are some of the authors you grew up on then?
Yeah, I mean, Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland and Narnia books, obviously. What's interesting though, I mean, my mom was a huge nerd also, so she separately had like, pretty much if there was a woman in like the 70s through 90s who was writing fantasy, we had those paperbacks on our shelves. So Lois McMaster Bujold, Anne McCaffrey, Le Guin, Butler, like all of them. But what I really think, I don't know, where my first actual desire to write my own books comes from is not so much wanting to copy those as it is like, as you get older, you kind of revisit what you loved so much when you were a kid. And when I was in grad school, I was writing my thesis on empire in British children's fiction. And so, let me tell you, through that lens of portal fantasy, really takes on a different light. You know, you start to be like, oh, so these 4 British children go to this magical land that is populated only by talking animals. That's a yikes. And then they end up on the throne, and everybody's happy. That's a yikes. And more than that, it's like a really interesting, like, you start to wonder, like, is that baked into the genre? Is that a part of that structure that is necessarily about, like, exploiting a frontier, or about conquest, or about civilization? Or is this something that, like, the wonder and the sort of childlike fantasy of it can be separated out from those power structures? Yeah.
That, going off on that, a lot of your characters, your leads, are othered in some way. Is that kind of a response to that?
I mean, I think so. I think I thought a lot about identity and power politics in grad school, and then I was teaching, when I was writing this, I was teaching African and African American history at Eastern Kentucky University. And I think what that does is not give you any particular expertise that you need to bring to your fiction, but it does give you an awareness of your own race. So I actually think, and this is difficult to talk about in ways that are careful, but I actually think I'm not trying to write so much about an othered experience as I am trying to find different angles to examine whiteness, because I think whiteness itself is a racialized experience that is often sort of subsumed and assumed to be a baseline and taken as this sort of the standard. And I really want it to be the race and power and identity politics to be like visible and tangible, no matter what angle I'm writing from.
Well, you do it in a way that makes it very approachable. That's a skill. Let's go to your first book. Where did 10,000 Doors of Summer? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, that was basically my thesis being on British children's literature and revisiting those things. And then it's the only book that I've ever, like, because I was writing short stories, I knew I wanted to try book, and I was like, I gotta learn maybe how to write. I'd never had, like, an MFA or a writing class or anything like that, so I was doing those to, like, learn craft. And then I was like, with, I think the hubris you can only have when it's your first novel and you haven't completely failed yet. I was like, I'm just gonna sit down and start it one day. And I wrote the first like 5-ish pages, and they're the only part of the book that has stayed the same the whole time. So and it turns out that like a lot of the work that, whatever you're doing that you are like interested in, researching, thinking about a lot, it's kind of just stewing in the back there, and it can come out in narrative forms before you've fully articulated like where you want to go with it.
One of your books in the afterword in the notes, you mentioned that that was the book you were writing when you had your first child. How did that affect the book in any way?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, way less time.
Did it work its way into the narrative though?
Yeah, definitely. I think I was writing 10,000 Doors before I had my first child, and in the very earliest conception of it, I did the thing, and it was self-consciously sort of, again, like mimicking Victorian literature. So those kids, conveniently, the parents are like gone, right? They're all orphans, or they're foundlings, or their father left them at the school, you know, a little princess, something like that. And certainly once you have a child, you're like, uh-oh, I don't like that at all. I think that's terrible. This would be deeply traumatic. And so then that was one of the reasons that I think that it ended up being structured the way it is, where there's actually like sections of the book that are the parent who is missing writing back, and there's sections that are from the child's perspective. And then my second book, I had my second kid during the writing of that one. And I will say, I think that the first book I wrote, the child is born, it was like in the beginning, it's like a paragraph maybe, and the second book, the birth scene is like 2 chapters. I was like, this is actually a very big deal, it's terrifying, it's a major plot point.
That's the one in future wishes?
Yeah.
So if you hadn't had your first child, would January's parents not have come back at the end?
I don't know, I think they might have, but it would have felt so much more like it does in those books where they're like, oh, the dad comes back and it's fine, you know, but it wouldn't have been the emotional heart of the book,
right. Perhaps.
It would have been much more about this like imagined child protagonist arc rather than a relationship between the two of them.
Your fairy tales. Who in their right mind says, I'm going to sit down and write a novella?
Okay.
What prompted that?
Tor.com prompted this. Which I love that they brought those back, that it used to be such a part of the genre.
It's amazing that they're suddenly popular now, because for the history of most of science fiction, novella has been the ugly stepchild that nobody knows what to do with.
Yeah, and they were published more, although I don't feel like they were labeled so much novellas in like the 60s. Some of those actually were novellas, but they were just pumped out. I'm so glad they're
50s
back.
and 60s, you saw a lot of short novels.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. So I'm so excited that they're back. And Tor.com was first having some success with that, and an editor with them was like, hey, I've seen your short stories, you don't have a novella. And I was like, I do, I'm so excited. And it was really fun because one of the things I think is so cool about genre right now is that it's one of the only spaces in publishing where you have every length available to you as a paid market. Like there are real short fiction markets in magazines, and there's novellas, and there's standalones, and there's trilogies, like whatever the scale idea you have, you don't have to like falsely lengthen it or squish it down. So I liked getting to write novellas.
Are we going to see more?
No, actually, sequels are really hard. I should have known that. I had only done standalone stuff ever before, and they offered me.
You tied it up nicely, though. So,
and then it was like, you see how it's done now. As I finished that one, I was like, and it's closed. And they've asked me to do more, and if I did, they would never be with those characters again. I just feel like the way that I conceive of like structuring in a short story or in a novel is like, I don't know, you're trying to build this perfect little snow globe, right? Like all the things are tied back the way they should be, and then to write a sequel, you have to go break it. You have to like have some resolution has not gone the way it was supposed to, and I found that I didn't like that.
that's actually something that bothers me as a reader. And it's, you go back, you read this great story, and then you go back into the sequel, and it's they've got to make changes.
Yeah.
It's refreshing to see someone that respects the story enough to leave it alone. Let's go to the audience real quick. Anyone got anything they want to bring up? Okay, Sam.
Did you ever have an idea that you thought you needed to become a better writer to turn into a book?
Yes. All the time. I'm like, my next idea is always a harder one than the one I last tried. My book that's coming out this fall is a time loop kind of a book, and I was right. I did need to become a better writer. It did take, there's a reason that it's going to be my fourth novel and not my second. I love time travel and time loop stories a lot, but both justifying the structure and keeping track of the structure and kind of pulling it off took a lot more skill than I had when I wrote my debut.
Yeah.
So, given what you just said about the snow globe effect, can we safely assume that Samuel read the 10,000 Doors and regained enough of his memory to go meet up with January again and be happily ever after?
I mean, like spoilers, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. One of my favorite pieces of writing advice that I've stolen is from Lois McMaster Bujold, who said that the best ending you can leave any character is with a new job of some kind or another. That it's more satisfying than like in a static position of like they're happy or whatever, but that you can picture the work that they're going to be doing with their lives. So.
Yeah.
I have to say, I literally cried with the after story at Starling House. That woman trying to escape from her parents. I said, "Oh my God, this is just so perfect."
I don't have a very hard problem or picturing this Starling House and 10,000 Doors existing in the same universe.
I mean, that's the advantage of a Portal fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. They feel very connected. Yeah.
I was just going to ask about your process. Are you a plotter? Are you do a lot of drafts? Or?
I feel like I used to answer this very confidently, to be like, I am a plotter, I plan everything out, and it's true, I do, but I am always wrong. So, I don't feel like I understand how people just truly sit down and just write and continue. Like, I understand little exercises or like to get into the voice or something like that, but to truly write a novel without outlining it and planning it, I don't. People do it, I believe them, I guess, but I don't understand how. But no, I like to, the first thing that I do actually has become kind of important to my process is that I write it like it's a short story, like a synopsis but good. Like, because the synopsis can become very mechanical and very like, it's hard to feel how the story would actually feel. So I try to like make it feel like an actual story or like I was explaining the plot to a friend or something. And then if that feels good and hangs together as a story, then I can kind of break that out into the mechanical pieces of like part 1, part 2, part 3, and chapters and stuff like that. And then I start drafting it. And then it starts to be completely bad and fail. Then it turns out I'm completely wrong and I rewrite it all. And I usually do that at about the 1/3 mark and about the 2/3 mark. And every single book that I start, I'm like, not this time though. This time I figured it out and I haven't been right yet.
Yeah.
So, well, comment and question. Novellas, because of the ebook market, the ebook first, ebook only publishers, thank goodness you can have any length in any genre. And novellas are very accepted widely, and which is happy for me because that's my natural length. My question is your book, is your thesis on empire and children's fiction available as a book commercially? So what's the title?
No, I feel like it's probably still at the University of Vermont. They had it posted digitally for a while, but it's under my government name. I can't remember the title of my own thesis right now. That's crazy. And it wasn't specifically just empire, it was representations of jungle in British children's literature. So not only the Jungle Book, but starting there. And sort of environmental imperialism.
So it's, in other words, it's available electronically.
Yeah,
If I can find it.
I can Google it and find it for you after this.
Oh, thank you.
So with your story process outline, and you're always wrong, what is like the length of time it usually takes you from conception to completion?
We don't talk about that. Next question. It's not fast. I think if I had to be on a book a year schedule to sort of sustain it, because I'm the income for my family of 4, and it is pure luck that I do not have to like maintain them much faster. I think I would literally have a different process if I needed to turn out books like that. Luckily, it's more like 2 or 3 years per book. That gives me plenty of time. I like to have something that I can really dig into for research first and kind of return to, because like you do the research you think you need, you start writing the book, you're like, incorrect, I didn't need that, I needed this other body of research. So it gives me time for, I mean, it's just a really iterative back and forth kind of a process. And I'm very lucky to get to be able to do it.
Hi, 2 quick questions. I guess one's the kind of first mercenary question. Did you bring books for us to buy so you can sign them, or do we need to pop over and get them?
There's some downstairs. I didn't bring my own stuff, I'm sorry.
Our dealers always, we let them know who our guests
Okay.
are, and they always stock up heavy on our guest of honor.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I try to support the authors if they borrow them. So
Gotcha.
that's why I asked. My second question is like, do you have like a writing group that you trust to sit there and read your stuff? You know, is that you found that helpful? And how did you find it?
There is no one on this earth that has ever read my actual first drafts. Those are for me. I have had variously less writing group than like a couple of friends that like will trade our manuscripts back and forth. But generally it is pretty far along my process before I'm trading manuscripts. And that's just pure insecurity and controlling this. Like, I know a lot of my friends who are authors have much more critique groups where they'll do chapter by chapter and they'll be trading them, or they'll give really rough draft comments. I think that sounds healthy and good. I just can't do that.
Out of all of the books so far, which of your characters do you think really represents yourself the most? Which did you put the most of yourself into?
I don't know. I feel like in the Witch's book, I kind of have 3 main characters, and one of them is a new mom, and she's tired, and that I think was fundamentally, increasingly though, the more I write, I find that I keep putting in sort of like middle-aged and older characters who are sort of like, ugh, at the entire plot, and increasingly I'm like, that's me in the book. It's the person who's like, good luck to y'all. That sounds exhausting.
You guys go have your adventure.
Yeah,
I'm just going to take
do
it down.
that. I feel like you've made some bad choices to land here, but.
Anyone else? Let's go back to your teaching. You started at in Tennessee teaching? Was it?
Kentucky.
Kentucky,
Eastern
okay.
Kentucky, yeah.
And you Imperial British literature.
Yeah, I mean, I went to, so, look, being a fantasy author is not an economically viable ambition. Neither is getting multiple history degrees, but these are the choices that I have made in my life. They should not have worked out as well as they have. I do not recommend them to anyone. Like, I've been going to like high schools and stuff, I'll get invited to talk, and I'm like, don't do this. This is not gonna work out. Whatever plan you have is better than this one. But, so I got my undergrad in history from Berea College in Kentucky, and then that was in 2009, so that was the recession, so then I lived in my van for a couple of years, and then I was like, one didn't work, why not another one? And I went and got a master's in history, which strangely was also not employable, and so I ended up adjuncting at online in part, and then in person at Eastern Kentucky.
And you're still teaching now, aren't you? No, you stopped.
No,
Okay.
I stopped. I quit my job.
What brought you to Virginia then?
I made a spreadsheet.
No.
This is how I make decisions in my life. So basically I have 2 kids, and I had always planned to kind of stay in rural Kentucky and like be one of the ones who stays behind and fights, and then suddenly your 4-year-old is about to turn 5 and you're going to be in public school, and the political landscape was getting vastly darker very quickly, and we kind of decided that was not the community we wanted for our kids. And so I made a spreadsheet of places we could move to. I didn't really want to leave the Upper South. Like, I didn't really want to leave home.
Yeah.
And so Charlottesville, Virginia turned out to like be a place that was kind of between my parents and his parents, and also had this sort of environment we wanted for our kids to be safe.
Virginia's still a nice, fairly, it's got nice, good liberal spots in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I needed at least purple. Swinging
Yeah.
blue.
Yeah. Charlottesville's a beautiful area.
It's really
Yeah.
nice.
All right, any other questions? Yeah.
So, related to your kids, I have a question. You shared a story a month or 2 ago about how your kid got assigned a project at school about writing about an author and said authors aren't famous. So just
That's
curious,
true.
what
That's
are their
true.
reactions to like this weekend?
Oh, they don't understand. Goodness, my kids are 6 and 8. Yeah, and my 6-year-old had to do like a history project, and the whole grade of 1st grade was assigned to authors. And she's like, but I want to do actual famous people. Fair enough. Like 2nd grade got athletes, and she was like, what are we doing? They have gone only to a couple of these types of things with me. They went to AwesomeCon last year in DC, and they were like, I don't know, like pretty clearly like, I think it's just gonna be a bunch of your nerd people. And they got there, and they did like a Jedi training for kids, and they were like so excited about it. And they come like running over from the Jedi training to my like signing line. And my 8-year-old was like, do they know about the Jedi training? So they're super unimpressed. Actually, my 8-year-old, when my first book finally actually came out in print, he was 2 or almost 2, and he like I'd been, I guess, talking about it a lot. He like pulls the book out of the box and goes, "It's just words in there," which is I keep in mind.
So has Hollywood shown any interest yet?
Oh, sure. I mean, they've all been options.
Yeah.
None of them have been made into things. The furthest I got was Once a Future, which is a co-writer contacted me, and we like pitched that and sold it to Amazon, and we got to write the first episode. It was going to be a TV show. It got like greenlit and
Yeah.
stuff, and then the writer's strike happened. But also, it was going to be canceled before that. And it wasn't going to be that good, to be honest with you. It's fine. But
You still got to cash the check, though, right?
exactly,
So,
they
there
have
you
to
go.
pay you even if they don't make the
Absolutely.
TV show. So I was like, oh no, I'll survive. But I think even without the writer's strike, I think it was kind of doomed, because I had a new executive who come on board, and I had a phone call where he was like, yeah, I just feel like we really love what you've done, but there's only so many angry women stories that we need. And I was like, all right, man, I do feel like, call me back in 3 years and see how we're doing. I don't know.
If you'd had complete creative control on that one, how would you have cast it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know enough
Yeah.
actors' names. I'm terrible at that. They were, like, my co-writer was like, we need to have like just dream people so
Yeah.
that they can envision things. And I was like, that's your job. That's not my job. I can't do that at all.
Yeah.
Do you take time off between your novels?
This is actually the first time that I've been out of contract since 2018, I think, or whenever I sold my first 2 books. I've always had like something still under contract while you're signing the next one or pitching the next book, so that you stay kind of rolling. And this time I don't. I've had like a 3-month gap now, which is amazing. I don't know what to do with myself. Actually, I do. I started writing a middle grade book, which is terrible. They're not marketable at all right now, but I'm trying anyway. I do end up taking time, usually because as I turn in a book, I'm like, well, that was the last one. It was terrible. It's a nightmare. They're going to cancel. You know, like I have a dark night of the soul for a while. And then there's rounds of things like copy edits and revisions and all this stuff that takes up time. And I'm just not a person who has like the next idea ready to go. It's gonna take a while of like sinking into this vague concept I had and like pulling together things and doing research before I really can start going on the next novel.
So no plans for the next one yet?
I mean, I have one coming out in fall already. I could have prayed.
Well, that one's done. That's
That one's
wrapped.
done.
That's so.
Yeah.
So you're
You
gonna
know-
take a little time before you start thinking about.
Yeah, I have this middle grade thing I want to do, and then
Okay.
I have like, it kind of starts as like, well, I know this is going to be a part of it, but it's like 3 disparate things that don't work as an elevator pitch yet.
Have they started scheduling a book tour for you for the next one?
A little bit. It's not going to be too big of one.
Yeah, just sticking
because
around the
I'm
East
increasingly
Coast
scared
area.
of planes. I don't know. Like, every day I read the news and I'm like, so I don't want to leave the country or maybe be on a plane.
It's not falling out of the sky.
Yeah, once you guys sort that out.
Well, hopefully you'll be back to Fountain Books to
Yeah.
promote that one. Yeah.
As far as your audiobooks go, we talked about cool accents. Do you have any choice and say so in your narrators?
Sometimes. Whatever choice and say so your publisher gives you is almost always a courtesy, right? Like you have sold the rights. So it depends on how friendly we're all feeling, how much time they have, how much choice they want to give you. That's fine, I understand that. So for 10,000 Doors, they were like, we're gonna send you a set of like 3 and you can choose your favorite. And it was like, great. And then they were like, update, actually, we chose one. And they were completely right. The main character of 10,000 Doors is a girl of mixed race descent named January, and there's this award-winning audiobook narrator who is named January Lavoie, who is of mixed race descent, and she wanted to do the book, and they were like, that is actually who's doing it. There you go. And I was like,
Nice.
good call, good idea.
Yeah.
Do you have a dream audiobook narrator, or does it depend on the book?
Moira Quirk, she did the Gideon the Ninth, the Locked Tomb books, and just such a good voice, and she has incredible, and this is not really a skill you need for my books, but I don't care, she has incredible comedic timing. Like, just the way she delivers sentences makes them funnier. So if I ever write something that she would record, that would be amazing.
You just said Dark Knight. Do you use Save the Cat?
Hmm?
You just said Dark Knight of the Soul. Do
Oh,
you use Save the Cat?
no, I hate Save the Cat, I'm sorry. I'm gonna do a story structures panel tomorrow, I think, so I can complain about that. I don't use any of I don't have like a standard structure that I like plug parts into. Because I mostly don't like them and I don't think that they bend sufficiently to the demands of the story itself.
How close do you get to your characters when you're writing them? Because you put them through some serious hell. Does that ever bother you? Because I know I've talked to some writers that they feel guilty sometimes about some of the things that they do to their creations.
Yeah, I don't at all. I'm God. No, it's more like I was listening to this amazing interview with George Saunders where he was kind of talking about how he conceives of the job of writing. And he's like, I don't see it as any different at all than like a man who designs a roller coaster. Like you are trying to do all of this labor to give someone a sense of wonder, like to take someone on this ride, and like your labor actually is very mechanical. It's just work, and it's very like you are keeping always in mind the ride that they're on, but you're focused on building the correct structure, and that's actually how I feel.
That's a good way of looking at it. Anyone else? Yeah.
You mentioned you had a new book coming out. Can you tell us about it?
I should be able to do that. I should start working on this. It always takes a minute, but within the next book promotion cycle, before you have the quick like answer.
We know it's a time loop book.
It is a time
what is the
loop
title
book.
for them to be looking
It is
for?
called The Everlasting, and it is.
It's a lady swords.
It is. It is
Yeah.
a lady knight stuck
Lady
in a time loop. If anybody is curious about that, I had a short story. I did like the short story version. You know how I was saying my first synopsis is sort of a short story to try and make it work. That one actually became its own whole short story, and that was published as The Six Deaths of the Saint. So it's a novel length, same idea kind of a thing of that.
You said fall. Do we have a more specific?
October.
Probably.
October. I think it's the end of October. I feel like.
End of October, okay, all right. Something for us to be looking for then. Yeah.
Have you seen the cover art for that
I
yet?
have. It finally has cover art. I have not seen as much of a fight over a cover. Like I bailed at one point. I was like, you know what? When y'all make up your minds, like sales, marketing, and my editor were at war. I think they finally settled it. It's great. It's nice, and it should be in the next couple of weeks. So I'll have the cover out.
All right, anyone else?
You talked about being the pantser versus planner situation, but could you give a little more detail about like what your typical day-to-day when you're actually in the thick of writing? What does that
Like
look
when I'm drafting?
Yeah.
So I do have 2 kids, and they are very disruptive. So I don't have like a super prescriptive. I try not to get too precious about like, well, it has to, I start at 6 and I write for 2 hours. My days are not like that. I have a chaotic household. We have chickens and then cats and and they always have friends over and things. It's very loud. But in general, ideally, I write when they're at school. I only probably have 3-4 hours of actual drafting time. I try to usually I get the words down in the first half of that, and then I spend the next making it pretty. I'm not a person who's like, don't go back and revise. I have to. If it's not pretty, I'm not going to be moving on to the next section. That's just not how it's going to work. And what I'm increasingly trying to figure out how to balance and what I'm failing at is the email portion of the job, which I know for everyone's job is a huge time sink, but like communication and email and administrative stuff is this circling burden that I never catch up with.
I've heard some great stories from a lot of authors about gifts from fans inspired by their stories. Have you gotten anything particularly memorable?
I mean, the coolest ones are tattoos,
Yeah.
for sure. I love a book-inspired tattoo. Those are absolutely the best. I did blurb someone's book, and I will not tell you who. It's a great book, though. And she's a debut author, and she mailed to my house. And I genuinely don't know how she got my address. Mailed to my house a huge tin of M&Ms that had printed on them, "Thank you, Alix E. Harrow, for blurbing my book." And my husband was like, "Do not eat those. That does not seem good." And I was like, I think it's fine.
How about interesting fan art? Anything pop up online that caught your attention?
Yeah, I mean, any fan art is great fan art. Honestly, you're just so excited to see somebody's interpretation. I'm trying to think. I like it. I'm especially a fan of the ones where visual artists do their own version of your cover. I don't know if you've seen when people do that, but it's very cool. I love it.
Let's go back to the audience. Anyone got? Okay. What do you read these days?
Yeah, I was literally going to be like, we can just talk about books.
We're
We're done.
We can
This
just sit
portion
and
is
probably
over.
talk for
Now
the next
we're gonna
3 hours
talk
about books, I'm sure.
I read probably like 5 to 10 historical romances a week, but that's just a kind of a baseline in the background. I have to be reading one of those, and then I read a bunch of books or blurbs, like more in my genre, and then I try to read with my husband at least once a month one of his serious literary novels that he picks up.
What do his tastes run to?
Oh, they're very good. I mean, he reads increasingly what I've been calling it is woman's midlife crisis novels. So a woman, her children get older and she realizes she doesn't love her husband. We read a lot of those. The ones we really overlap on are Sally Rooney. We both just read Intermezzo together. That book is incredible. I absolutely recommend that. All of hers are incredible. If you want to read about depressed Irish people, there's no one doing it like her. What have you been reading?
Well, I just read a whole bunch of your books.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
I actually, I'm one of several judges for the Webster Award, so I read all of the Webster nominees, and then when I finished with those, I jumped into your catalog.
A lot of con reading.
I have been doing a lot of con reading, and I will probably shortly start. I gotta see who the guest author congregate is, because I know I'm interviewing them as well. So I'm probably gonna have to read up on that as well. I haven't been reading for fun as much anymore, although it's always pleasure when the fun and the homework overlap. And it's been a January through March was.
Yeah.
I had a whole bunch of really good books to read for those 3 months.
I mean, honestly, that's one of the reasons. Like, I am not a romance reader historically, but in the last couple of years, I started doing it, and I think it's because it's not my genre, and so it's not work. It's not for blurbs. I don't know anything about these people. We're not going to be on a panel together. It's great. Most of them are even like out of print. They're old. They're not literally. It's not going to come up. I'm not going to see a publisher's weekly announcement, and it makes it feel more to me like reading used to feel before this was my job.
I also went. I designed the escape room here. And each scenario, there's always a bookcase. And based on what the scenario is, I usually have new books for it. So I spend a lot of time going to Goodwills to get cheap books. And I always find ones for the scenario, but I always also end up with a huge pile. I've probably got about 30 books on my nightstand right now of stuff that I've found. So my to-read list is huge right now. Yeah.
I have one. Speaking of used bookstores, what's your favorite used bookstore in Charlottesville?
Daedalus.
Is it Blue Whale?
No. Does it need to be Blue Whale?
No.
Okay.
I just
Hold
like
on.
that one. Except they do have that scary staircase.
Yeah. I like Daedalus. I am also now a volunteer for the Friends of the Library in Charlottesville, and they do their twice yearly book sales, used book sales, and they are one of the few places you can still get like $1 and $2 books, and they have a huge selection, and I really love it.
Yeah, the Richmond
What's the
Library
name of
does
the
that
store
too. It's great.
for those of us not in Charlottesville?
Daedalus Books.
Daedalus, okay.
It's real crazy. Like, it's one of those only used books, curated, but also just lots of stacks of things.
Yes.
I may have to go check that
3
out.
floors.
I've found some weird
many
stuff in
small
there.
rooms, many
Oh, that's
weird
really cool.
books.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
Nice. I saw another hand, yeah.
You talked about doing blurbs. Is that something like your publisher sends you, other authors ask you to do? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, the blurbing economy is weird and kind of bad, I think. I don't think it's a great use of our time because I don't really think blurbs sell books. I don't know if that's true, but publishing still thinks that they do. So sometimes I get them from editors. Sometimes I get them from my own editor if it's like another author's thing. More often, increasingly, as you kind of make friends in the industry, everyone that you love dearly has a book to blurb, and so then you're failing not only your colleagues or your editor, but your friends when you fail to get to all the books to blurb. Yeah, I mean, like, all the blurbs for my next book came from me posting on Instagram, does anybody want to blurb this? It's another author. So I don't think that's the most efficient or good use. I left it up for like 5 hours. I was like, yeah, that's enough people. I think we'll be fine.
Do you ever have problems with that? You know, if you don't enjoy the book, do you just return it and not blurb it?
Yeah,
or-
I say, I'm so sorry, I just didn't have time. Just didn't get to it. And honestly, that's true most of the time,
Yeah.
is that I just didn't have time, or that I started it and I could tell that, like, even though it was a fine book, it was not something that was really, really, like, urgently I wanted to read it.
Right.
And so it's not what I'm going to spend my time on.
I'll put also say I like your Instagram account because you also mentioned other people's books that you like. And so I've added like 3 or 4 to my reading list from that.
Yes, excellent. This is the true power that I want. I don't believe in blurbs, but everyone should follow me on Instagram and I will tell you what to read, and I'm right.
Wait, what is your Instagram account? I just got Instagram like a month ago, so I don't know anything.
Alex.e.harrow. I'm also on Blue Sky. That's Alix E. Harrow.
All right, anybody else? Okay, you guys are, here we go.
Have you considered writing a book about 2 young children living in a university town that find a portal?
That is not what the middle grade's gonna
You
be.
could totally set it in Daedalus. You can get lost there.
That's true. That's true. That's where I've lost my actual children in Daedalus. No.
Story
What's
writing
fun about trying to write middle grade is that I do get to talk to my 8-year-old about it, and like 8-year-olds can't really lie yet. Like, so you can just his face sort of goes. Like when the plot takes like a turn that he's like not into, he's like, yeah, that sounds good, Mom. And you're like, okay, all right, I'll come back to you tomorrow. Like, I'll get back.
Let me go replot.
Yeah.
Harsh criticism from an 8-year-old.
I was like,
yeah.
what's your idea? And he's like, I think that he should have a cool scar. And I was like, you're probably right. I can figure that out.
Will they get a credit?
Maybe a dedication. I don't know. You know.
So have you got a plot for the middle grade book yet, or?
Not totally, and again, nothing I can like effectively pitch yet. But it has been really fun. I think just because I didn't really realize this, but I've been doing at least some form of research for it in that I read to my kids every night. So, and it's really fun to be like, I don't know, those of you who have children where you're like, oh, I love this book when I was a kid, and then you read it out loud to them and you're like, oh, it does not hold up at all. This is terrible. This is not good. You're like skipping parts. Yeah, and some of them though are as wonderful as you remember them being, and like the difference between those and how they react to them is like very fun. That's one of the most enjoyable things.
What are they enjoying the most?
It's weird. I didn't expect them to like it. I thought it would be a really hard sell, but The Hobbit still hits.
Yeah.
It's written so much to be, I mean, because he wrote it as a story like that he's telling out loud to his children, that like every chapter ends on this perfect little cliffhanger, or like they're out of one, you know, piece of trouble and then the trolls are coming. Like it's written so episodically and so satisfyingly. And I think there's something about Bilbo as a child standing character where he is an adult, but like they innately relate to him in a way that made it really work. They loved Patricia Reed's Enchanted Forest books. They loved, what else has been a really good hit? We're reading Dragon Slippers right now, which I did not think that my kids would be into, because it does at one point just become basically like a middle school romance, and my 8-year-old, I'm so glad he's not here yet to be embarrassed, is like so into it. He's like, I don't know about that other prince. He seems like he's not, I feel like he's not telling her the truth, and I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. It's a really good time.
Very astute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got to meet like any of your heroes, like at book signings and stuff like that?
Yeah, which is crazy. Just meeting other authors. I really don't think that I thought of authors as people until I got this as a job. You know, like I didn't spend a lot of time wondering what they were like as individuals, and then suddenly you're like on panels together or doing events together. Probably one of the coolest is I was at ALA, like the American Library Association, and this woman waited in my signing line, and she was like, sign it to Megan. And then I read her name tag and I was like, that is Megan Whalen Turner, the author of the Thief series that I loved so much as a kid. And I was like, what? Hold on.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, she was very, very cool and very, very nice to do our authors for no reason.
Do we have, we're coming close to the end. Do we have any last questions? Tell us about what you got coming up. What are the next few places people can catch you at?
I think I'm going to be at ALA again this year. Although I don't think that's been announced, so don't.
What else you got tonight?
Oh, here. No, I'm done today, except for signing.
Okay.
So tomorrow I get to do the story structures thing, which I have a lot of very strong opinions about. I'm very excited about that one. And then Portal Fantasies. Again, I have strong opinions, but less likely to fight others.
Cass, you're on that one too, aren't you? Cass usually has strong opinions as well.
Excellent.
So,
Only has one opinion.
Wonderful. That's the only way they come. So I don't know.
Actually, I'm hoping I can break away to catch that. That looks like it's going to be a fun panel. Cool, all right. Well, unless anyone else has a last question, we have hit our time limit. So, all right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody.